2 weeks ago, I came across the kind of gut-wrenching truth that no husband expects: the son I'd been raising for 5 years wasn't my biological child. You can imagine the shock. It was like the floor dropped out from under me. My wife, the woman I'd been married to for 6 years and together with for 9, had cheated on me and, to make matters worse, had another man's child without ever saying a word. I'd started suspecting something and decided to take a paternity test without telling her, and when the results came back, they confirmed my worst fears. In the heat of the moment, I confronted her. I couldn't hold back my anger, calling her all kinds of names, my voice full of betrayal and hurt. She broke down in tears, saying she'd kept it from me because she didn't want to ruin the life we'd built together, the family of 3 that, until now, I thought was solid. When I demanded to know why she'd done it, she explained that it was the fallout from a big argument we'd had years ago. She had a one-time fling as a way of lashing out, she said, but had been faithful to me ever since. She admitted she'd always had doubts about whether I was truly the father. She confessed that she didn't pursue a paternity test because she saw how happy I was and didn't want to break that illusion. Abortion wasn't something she could bring herself to consider, and so she went on, pretending nothing was wrong for the sake of peace in our family. I told her right there that I couldn't stay married to her after this, and what's more, I wasn't going to stay in the life of a child that wasn't mine. She was desperate, pleading with me through her tears to reconsider, to think of all the years I'd spent as a devoted husband and father. She tried to convince me that I was his dad, regardless of biology, and that I shouldn't let a bit of DNA ruin the family we'd created. But I was beyond listening. I left the house without looking back, her words and pleas ringing in my ears as I walked away. In the beginning, I thought I'd keep the whole mess to myself, out of respect for what we'd had. But the betrayal simmered, growing into a storm of anger and resentment that I couldn't contain. So, I let it out. I told everyone, our friends, our families, and the fallout was immediate. Her parents were livid. They decided to cut off all contact with her, saying they wanted nothing to do with a daughter who could lie like that. My sister, who's always been protective, called her and gave her an earful, letting her know exactly what she thought of her actions. But not everyone was on my side. Her siblings had a different view, telling me that I shouldn't have aired our dirty laundry and shamed her so publicly. They believed I should have kept it between us. Her sister, in particular, was furious. She called me up yesterday, urging me to come back, saying I needed to forgive her and take care of my son. I told her straight, I don't have a son. That sent her into a rage. She called me every name in the book, saying I was weak, that it was no wonder my wife had strayed. She even accused me of being insecure and pathetic, claiming that only a pathetic man would go behind his wife's back to confirm his suspicions with a paternity test and then abandon a child just because we didn't share blood. After that call, I was done with her nonsense. I decided to take things up a notch, so I dialed her husband. I laid out the whole story, even half joking that maybe he should think twice about trusting her family, maybe he ought to check his own situation to make sure everything's above board. To my surprise, he apologized on her behalf, and we left it at that. Since then, I've ignored any calls from my wife and her sister. I'm done engaging with people who can't see things from my perspective or think it's okay to brush off such a betrayal. After cutting off the calls from my wife and her sister, I found myself dealing with a whirlwind of mixed emotions. Part of me still felt hollow and betrayed, and another part wanted to erase every memory of the life I'd thought was mine. Friends and family kept reaching out, offering their sympathy and support, but I wasn't sure if they fully understood what it felt like to have a betrayal sliced through my life like this. Every time I looked around the house, reminders of the past, the family photos, the toys scattered about, seemed like hollow echoes of a life that never truly existed. My wife, Amy, let's call her that, wouldn't stop calling. She was leaving message after message, each one more desperate than the last, begging me to come home and talk things through. She kept reminding me of all the good years we'd shared, all the memories, all the moments as a family. She pleaded, saying she'd do anything to make it right, to keep the family together. But every time I listened to one of those messages, it was like pouring salt on an open wound. How could I go back to a life built on lies? Eventually, her pleas became more frantic. She even started using our son, Jack, I'd called him son for 5 years, after all, as leverage. She talked about how confused he was, how much he missed me, and how he didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. Hearing that hit hard. No matter what, I'd been there for that boy from the day he was born. I'd watched his first steps, heard his first words, and laughed with him during endless nights of bedtime stories. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the fact that he wasn't mine. The bond one thought we shared was shattered, and I couldn't just piece it back together like nothing had changed. My sister, Jenny, stayed in close contact through all of this. She's a tough woman, always the voice of reason and the one to give me a reality check when I need it. She kept telling me to stay strong, reminding me that I had every right to walk away. You've been wronged, Alex, she'd say. I guess I should give myself a name here, too. It's okay to feel angry, to feel hurt. Don't let anyone guilt you into accepting what you can't live with. She'd never been a big fan of Amy, and I could tell she was almost relieved to have a reason to voice all her pent-up doubts. Then came another twist. One evening, while I was out for a walk trying to clear my head, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Amy's brother, Greg. He'd always been the quieter one in her family, a guy who never really got involved in the drama. But this time, he had something to say. He apologized for what his sister had done and mentioned how shocked he was when he found out. I can't believe she hid this from you for so long, he wrote. I thought you deserved better, man. You really did. Greg went on to say that he understood if I couldn't forgive her but hoped I wouldn't cut off Jack completely. He argued that biology isn't everything and reminded me of how much I'd meant to the boy. I appreciated his words, but they only added to the inner turmoil. Was it heartless to walk away from Jack when I'd been the only father he'd ever known? Or would staying just be living a lie and putting myself through a lifetime of constant reminders of the betrayal? After that text from Greg, I couldn't sleep. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying all the moments I'd had with Jack. Memories of teaching him to ride a bike, showing him how to throw a baseball, and even watching him try to imitate me shaving in the mornings flooded my mind. He was an innocent kid caught in the middle of a mess he never asked for, and now I had to decide if I could bear to be a part of his life or if cutting ties would be best for both of us. One evening, I finally decided to meet Amy. I needed answers, maybe even closure, before making any decisions. When I walked into the cafe where we agreed to meet, I could see she'd been waiting anxiously, her face drawn and tired. She looked like a shadow of the confident woman I once knew, and for a moment, I felt a pang of pity. But that feeling quickly faded as I remembered why we were there. She began to apologize again, over and over, her words pouring out like she'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. She explained that she'd never intended to hurt me, that it was a moment of weakness after a fight that had left her feeling lost. I know I messed up, Alex, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I love you. I love what we have, what we had. Can't we try to move past this, for Jack's sake? I looked at her, trying to hold back a flood of anger and disappointment. How could you not tell me? For 5 years, Amy. 5 years, I thought he was mine. Did you even care how I'd feel when the truth came out? She nodded, her eyes welling up. I was terrified, Alex. I saw how much you loved him, how much you loved being his father. I thought that if I kept quiet, we'd all be happier in the end. For the first time in a while, I didn't know what to say. I'd expected anger, maybe resentment, but not the strange mix of guilt and confusion that I felt. It was like she'd taken our life and twisted it into something that was no longer real. I left that cafe feeling as torn as ever, wondering if there was any way to salvage anything from the wreckage of our relationship. After leaving the cafe, I felt like I was trapped in a fog. All the emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, swirled inside me, making it impossible to think clearly. I kept replaying Amy's words in my mind, trying to decide if there was any truth to her regret or if it was just another layer of manipulation. Every time I thought I might soften, though, I'd remember the cold reality: she'd kept such a massive secret for 5 years. No matter her reasons, she'd built a life on a lie, and I'd been the one living it blindly. As the days went on, I tried to distance myself from the whole situation, even considered moving to another town to escape the memories. But one evening, I got a call from Amy's parents, unexpectedly. They'd been furious with her initially, vowing to cut off contact, but they'd come around and decided to reach out to me directly. Her mother, Jane, sounded weary but calm as she spoke, her voice tinged with both sorrow and a hint of pleading. Alex, I know Amy did something terrible. I won't try to justify it. But, we're talking about Jack, too. You've been his father in every way that matters, and he's already hurting with you gone. We don't know what to say to him anymore, Jane admitted. She paused, then added, if not for Amy, would you at least consider seeing him? For Jack's sake. The word stung. I'd been wrestling with that very question every night since I walked out. Jack was caught in the middle, and as much as I wanted to shut down and walk away from the whole mess, it wasn't his fault. The kid had never asked for any of this. But, at the same time, how could I be a father to him knowing the truth? I agreed to think about it, though I couldn't make any promises. That night, I lay awake for hours, wondering if cutting ties would hurt him less in the long run than staying around and pretending. But just when I thought I might have a handle on things, I got a knock on my door the next day. It was Greg, Amy's brother, the same one who had messaged me before. Greg didn't waste time with small talk. "Look, Alex, I came because you need to know something else," he said, his face serious. "There's more to Amy's story than you think." That hit me like a punch in the gut. "More?" I asked, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. What could possibly make this worse? He looked away, hesitating before he continued. "I don't know all the details, but I know Amy kept some things hidden from everyone, not just you. It wasn't just a one-time thing. She had a longer connection with the guy, even if she says she only slipped up once. I thought you should know." Hearing this was like getting betrayed all over again. She had sworn it was a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness, but now I was being told there was more beneath the surface. I thanked Greg for telling me, though the anger bubbling up made it hard to keep my voice steady. As he left, I realized that any lingering doubt about my decision had been erased. Amy had kept me in the dark about even more than I'd imagined. The very next day, I decided to reach out to a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings officially. I knew it was time to take control of my life again. But the lawyer, an older man with a sympathetic look in his eyes, advised me to think carefully about Jack's role in my decision. "The courts might see you as his father regardless of biology," he warned gently. 5 years is a long time to be in a kid's life. Think about what's best for him. The lawyer's words weighed on me. Even if I couldn't forgive Amy, I needed to make peace with my decision about Jack, for his sake and mine. I didn't want to be caught in a legal battle that would pull him back and forth. So, after a sleepless night, I came to a decision, would say goodbye to Jack, face to face, one last time. I couldn't live a lie, but I also couldn't vanish from his life without any explanation. A few days later, I arranged to meet Jack in a park, the one where we'd spent countless weekends playing and laughing. He ran up to me, his little face lighting up as he hugged me, and my heart broke all over again. I fought to keep my voice steady as we sat on a bench, and I began to explain that things would be different now. I told him that he was special to me, that nothing about that would ever change, but that I wouldn't be around as much anymore. "Why, Dad?" he asked, his voice tiny and confused. "Did I do something wrong?" That question almost shattered me. I reassured him, telling him he hadn't done anything wrong, that sometimes adults go through things that are hard to understand. I told him I loved him and that I would always remember him as my son, even if life was taking us in different directions now. He looked down, quiet, processing my words, and then gave me a tight hug, whispering, "I love you, Dad." I held him for a long moment, trying to lock that memory in my mind as one last, precious moment between us. After that, I walked away from the park, tears blurring my vision. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't keep living in a world of broken trust and hidden lies. Walking away didn't make the pain vanish, but it felt like I was finally letting go of the weight of betrayal that had been crushing me. And as I left, I knew that while Jack might always be a part of my heart, I had to start rebuilding my life for myself. In the days that followed, life felt strangely empty, but I also felt a sliver of relief breaking through the heaviness. I'd said my goodbye to Jack, and while it left a hole in my heart, I knew it was the right thing for me. I started taking small steps to reclaim my life. I'd wake up in the morning and force myself through a routine, go for a run, make breakfast, read the paper. Simple things, but each one felt like a small victory, a way to remind myself that there was life beyond the pain. Amy kept reaching out, sending text messages and leaving voicemails, mostly apologetic or pleading for another chance. I knew she was desperate, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. At this point, any communication with her felt like reopening wounds that were just beginning to heal. The betrayal was too deep, the lies too damaging. She'd not only destroyed our marriage but upended my identity as a father. How could I ever trust her again? One evening, though, curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to one of her more recent voicemails. Her voice was shaky, filled with regret. She said she'd started going to therapy, that she was working on understanding her mistakes and figuring out why she'd let things spiral so far out of control. She admitted that she'd made selfish decisions, that she'd taken advantage of my trust and hurt me in ways she couldn't ever fully repair. "I know I've lost you," she said, her voice breaking. "But I need you to know that I'm trying to change. For myself, for Jack." Hearing that confession gave me mixed feelings. Part of me felt a pang of pity, wondering if she was truly remorseful, while the other part reminded me of all the damage she'd done. I couldn't deny that I was still angry. Maybe time would soften that anger, but I knew I wasn't ready to forgive. Not now, and maybe not ever. As I continued moving on, friends and family became my support system, especially my sister, Jenny. She dropped by often, bringing food and insisting we go out to distract me from everything. Jenny had always been the one to push me out of my comfort zone, and now she seemed determined to see me rebuild. One night, over a couple of beers, she finally brought up the topic I'd been avoiding, the future. "You know, Alex, you're only 34, she said, giving me a nudge. "You've got your whole life ahead of you. I know it's hard to think about now, but there's more out there than this mess. You deserve better." I knew she was right, though it felt surreal to think about dating again, or even letting someone new into my life. Trust was shattered territory for me now, but I didn't want to close off every door. The idea of starting over felt daunting, but there was a flicker of hope in the back of my mind, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, I could find something genuine again, someday. A few weeks later, I decided to take a solo trip to clear my head, heading up to a cabin in the mountains where I could get away from everything. No reminders of Amy, no whispers of betrayal, just fresh air and a chance to think. Up there, surrounded by towering trees and the quiet hum of nature, I found a peace I hadn't felt in months. I spent my days hiking, writing down my thoughts in a journal, and reflecting on the future I wanted to build. As much as the betrayal had hurt, I started to see it as a turning point. It forced me to face my limits and redefine my values, to set boundaries and recognize what I could and couldn't accept in my life. I wanted to be free of resentment, to let go of the anger and hurt that had weighed on me since the day I learned the truth. I knew it would take time, but each day in that cabin brought me a little closer to forgiveness, not for Amy, but for myself, so I could leave the bitterness behind and make room for something new. When I returned home, things were a little clearer. I still had a long road ahead, but I was ready to face it. I'd set up appointments with a therapist, recognizing that I needed guidance to work through the lingering feelings of betrayal and to rebuild my sense of self. I'd spent so much time tied to a role that wasn't truly mine, and now I needed to rediscover who I was, independent of all the lies and half-truths that had surrounded my life with Amy. One day, I got a letter in the mail from her. I nearly tossed it without reading, but something stopped me. It was a lengthy apology, written by hand, where she again expressed her regrets and wished me peace and happiness, even if it wasn't with her. She acknowledged that she had no right to ask anything of me and that she understood if I chose to never speak to her again. Strangely, the letter brought a sense of closure. It was as if, finally, the chapter was ending, and I could turn the page. In the months that followed, I settled into a new routine, slowly letting people back into my life, cautiously opening up to new friendships, and, in time, even allowing myself to imagine a future that wasn't tinged with betrayal. The journey hadn't been easy, and I had scars that would always remind me of what happened. But I'd come to a place where I was ready to embrace life again, wiser and stronger from the experience, ready to find peace within myself. In the following months, I focused on building a life that felt like mine again. Therapy helped me sort through the mix of emotions, resentment, guilt, sadness, that lingered. Facing those feelings head-on made me stronger, more grounded. I spent time doing things I enjoyed, things I hadn't made time for in years. I picked up old hobbies, like woodworking and hiking, filling my weekends with projects and trips to places that reminded me how big and beautiful the world still was, despite everything. The biggest shift was learning to forgive myself. For months, I'd been angry, not just at Amy but also at myself for being fooled, for not seeing the signs, for trusting so completely. But therapy helped me see that I couldn't blame myself for loving and trusting my wife. I realized that my openness, my commitment to our family, had been strengths, not weaknesses. I'd given my all, and the failure of our marriage wasn't my fault. Accepting that was like letting go of a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. One evening, I was visiting Jenny's place for a family barbecue. She'd been my rock through everything, and her husband, Mike, was a good friend who knew how to keep things lighthearted. They'd invited a handful of friends, some neighbors, just to have a good time. It felt refreshing to be around people again, laughing and enjoying the simple things. At the barbecue, I met Rachel. She was a friend of Jenny's from work, and we ended up talking over the grill, swapping jokes and stories about how we each knew Jenny. Rachel had a warm smile and an easy laugh, and she was good at putting people at ease. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely interested in getting to know someone new. We spent the rest of the evening chatting, and it felt natural, unforced. She didn't pry into my past, and I appreciated that. We talked about favorite books, funny family moments, and places we'd both like to travel. Nothing deep, just light conversation, but it felt like a start. In the weeks that followed, Rachel and I began seeing each other occasionally. We kept it casual, and there was no pressure. I was honest with her about needing time, about everything I'd been through, and she respected that. She was patient, understanding, and most importantly, kind. Spending time with her reminded me of what it felt like to trust again, even if it was just in small steps. She didn't fill the hole left by the past, but she helped me see that there was more to life than the pain I'd been holding on to. One weekend, we went on a road trip to a coastal town I'd always wanted to visit. Rachel had a way of bringing out my adventurous side, so we spent the days exploring the beach, trying out little cafes, and wandering through art shops. There was a moment when we were standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the wind whipping around us, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time, a quiet contentment, a sense that life could be good again. The road to healing wasn't linear. There were still days when memories of Amy, Jack, and the life I thought I'd had would creep in. But those moments became fewer, and the pull of the past gradually faded. I found myself thinking of Jack with a sense of fondness rather than pain, recalling the good memories we shared without the sharp ache that used to accompany them. In a way, I came to see my time with him as a chapter in my life that, while brief, had still shaped me into the man I was. Rachel and I took things slow, and I appreciated her patience. She became a friend as much as anything else, someone I could confide in and laugh with. Over time, I found myself trusting her more, and for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I could see a future, one that was honest, grounded, and filled with new possibilities. She never tried to replace what I'd lost, instead, she helped me build something new. Looking back, I realized that my life with Amy, even with all the betrayal, had taught me lessons I would carry forward. I'd learned about boundaries, trust, and the strength it took to walk away when something no longer served me. And in that, I found a kind of peace. I'd survived something I once thought would break me, and now I was ready to move forward, ready to build a life on my own terms, with people who valued honesty and kindness. So, I took things one day at a time, cherishing the small steps forward and the new connections that were beginning to shape my life. I couldn't say where things would go with Rachel, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking back. I'd come out of the storm, battered but not broken, and I was finally ready to embrace whatever the future had in store. Months passed, and I continued to find a steady rhythm in my life, a sense of stability I hadn't felt in a long time. Rachel and I grew closer, though we kept our relationship uncomplicated. She understood my need for space and respected that my journey back to trusting others was a slow one. With her, there was no pressure to rush anything, and that gave me a rare sense of comfort. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could just be myself without any expectations. As the seasons changed, I found myself reconnecting with old friends and even picking up a few new hobbies. I tried my hand at photography, capturing small moments of beauty, a sunset, an old building, the quiet solitude of a rainy day. There was something therapeutic about looking through a lens and framing the world around me, finding beauty in ordinary things. It reminded me of my own journey, how even after everything had fallen apart, there were still good things worth holding on to. But just when I thought I'd left the past behind, I received an unexpected message that stirred everything up again. It was from Amy. After months of silence, she had written to say that Jack missed me. She asked if I would consider seeing him, even if just for an afternoon. She said that he still talked about me, still kept the drawings we'd made together, and that he didn't understand why I'd left so suddenly. Her words hit hard, reopening emotions I'd tried so hard to pack away. I spent days mulling over that message, torn between wanting to protect myself and the ache of leaving Jack without any closure. After discussing it with Rachel and my therapist, I decided that maybe it was worth saying one last goodbye, not for Amy's sake, but for Jack. He was just a child, and despite the tangled web of lies, he'd only ever known me as his dad. So, one Saturday afternoon, I arranged to meet Jack at a park. Amy had agreed to stay away, allowing us some time alone. When I arrived, Jack was already there, running toward me with a wide smile. Seeing him brought back a flood of memories, some happy, some painful. But I pushed through the mix of emotions, reminding myself that he deserved a goodbye, a moment of closure he could understand. We spent the day playing, talking, and laughing like old times. Jack didn't ask many questions about why I'd been gone, and I figured he probably wouldn't understand the full story anyway. Instead, we focused on the present. I told him stories, helped him with a small art project he'd brought, and enjoyed the simplicity of just being with him. When it was time to go, he looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes and asked, "Will I see you again, Dad?" The words nearly undid me. I knelt down, struggling to find the right answer, one that wouldn't hurt him but also wouldn't give him false hope. "I don't know, buddy," I said softly, my voice breaking just a little. "But I want you to remember something, okay? No matter what, you're a wonderful kid. You're smart, you're kind, and you'll do amazing things one day. And even if I'm not around, I'll always be proud of you." He gave me one last hug, tight and lingering, as if he understood in his own way that this was goodbye. I watched him run off, and as he turned to wave at me, I felt a strange sense of peace. I knew I'd done the right thing, giving him the closure he needed. And in a way, it brought me a sense of closure, too. Leaving the park that day, I realized I'd made peace with the past. Jack would always be a part of my heart, a memory of a life I once cherished. But I knew it was time to close that chapter fully and move forward without looking back. Rachel was waiting for me when I got home, offering me the quiet support I needed. She didn't ask any questions, just sat with me as I processed everything, her presence a reminder that I was no longer alone in my journey. With her by my side, I felt ready to continue building a future unburdened by the weight of betrayal, a future where trust and honesty would be at the foundation. As time moved on, life became brighter, more hopeful. I kept finding joy in the little things, rediscovering what it meant to live freely and without the constant shadow of doubt. Rachel and I continued to grow closer, and for the first time, I allowed myself to envision a future with her, a future rooted in trust, respect, and understanding. I'd gone through one of the most challenging experiences of my life, but in the end, I'd emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The pain of betrayal had scarred me, but it had also shown me what truly mattered, living authentically, surrounding myself with people who valued honesty, and never settling for less than I deserved. I'd found my way out of the storm, and with each passing day, I embraced the peace I'd fought so hard to reclaim. As the years passed, the life I built began to feel like something sturdy, a foundation I could finally trust. Rachel became more than just a part of my healing, she became my partner in all the ways that mattered. We were there for each other, balancing each other's quirks and strengths, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't thought possible after everything that had happened. Eventually, we moved in together, setting up a home that felt warm and welcoming. Every corner of the house held memories we'd made together, weekend DIY projects, lazy Sundays filled with coffee and books, and dinners where we'd talk about everything from dreams to the simple details of our day. There was something comforting in the quiet predictability of our life, the stability I'd once thought I'd never regain. One evening, Rachel brought up a conversation I hadn't anticipated but had, deep down, been waiting to have. She gently asked if I'd ever thought about having children, about starting a family together. The question surprised me, not because I hadn't considered it but because of the emotions it stirred up. The idea of being a father again was complicated. I still thought about Jack from time to time, wondering how he was doing, if he was happy. But with Rachel, the idea felt different, it felt possible, grounded in trust and love. She reassured me that whatever fears I had, we would face them together. Her unwavering support was all the reassurance I needed, and over the following months, we decided to start trying for a family of our own. The day Rachel told me she was pregnant was a moment I'll never forget. She had this joyful, tear-filled smile that lit up the room, and I knew then that everything I'd gone through, every painful memory, every ounce of heartache, had brought me to this moment, to this new beginning with her. We spent hours talking about the future, about how we'd raise our child with honesty, compassion, and all the love we could give. When our son was born, holding him for the first time felt like healing in a way I couldn't have imagined. All the hurt from the past faded into the background, replaced by an overwhelming sense of gratitude and love. I knew I was ready to be the father I'd always wanted to be, this time without the shadows of doubt and betrayal hanging over me. Life became a beautiful mix of diaper changes, sleepless nights, and all the little joys that come with raising a child. Watching him grow, seeing his first smile, hearing his first laugh, these moments felt like gifts, reminders of the resilience I'd found and the family I'd finally built on a foundation of truth and love. Rachel and I navigated the challenges of parenthood together, and our relationship grew even stronger, shaped by our commitment to each other and the family we were creating. Every now and then, memories of my past would surface, but they no longer held power over me. I thought of Jack and hoped he was happy, hoped he'd found a stable and loving life, even if it wasn't with me. There was a sense of peace in knowing that I had done my best, that I'd loved him in the time I was there, and that letting go had allowed me to find something honest and lasting. Rachel and I continued to grow our life together, and as our son grew older, I saw pieces of myself in him, his curiosity, his laughter, his kindness. I made it my promise to be the father he needed, to be present, to show him what love and trust looked like. And with Rachel, I knew I'd finally found a partner who believed in the same values, who walked with me through the darkest moments and stayed by my side as I rebuilt. Looking back, I realized that while betrayal had shattered me, it had also led me to a path of self-discovery and strength. I'd faced my pain, come to terms with my past, and emerged with a deeper understanding of myself and what I truly wanted. And here, with Rachel and our son, I'd found everything I needed, a life built on truth, love, and the unshakable foundation of trust. In the end, the journey had been worth every challenge. I'd learned that life isn't about what's taken from us, but about what we create from the pieces we're left with. And now, with my family beside me, I was living proof that it's possible to find happiness and healing, even after the most profound heartbreak. As the years unfolded, our family life blossomed into something I once could only dream of. Rachel and I had a second child, a little girl who brought her own light and laughter into our home. Watching our children grow, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the life we'd created. Each milestone, a first word, a new skill, a birthday, served as a reminder that I had moved beyond the pain and found a new, more meaningful chapter. Parenthood came with its challenges, of course. Sleepless nights, juggling work and family, and the everyday hustle sometimes wore us out. But Rachel and I had built a partnership where we leaned on each other in those tough moments. When things got overwhelming, we'd take a step back, find a moment of quiet, and remind ourselves that we were in it together. We made it a point to communicate openly, sharing not just the good moments but the struggles, too. I knew from my past that secrets and resentment could grow silently, so we kept things transparent, rooted in honesty. Our children grew up knowing a home full of love and respect. I taught them the values I had come to embrace through my own journey: integrity, kindness, resilience. I wanted them to know that family isn't just about biology or shared blood but about the bonds of trust and commitment we build with each other every day. I often found myself reflecting on how much my life had changed, how much I had grown from the man I was back then, filled with anger and pain, to the father I had become, someone determined to give his family everything he could. On rare occasions, I'd hear snippets about Jack from mutual friends or acquaintances. I learned that he was doing well, thriving in school, and that he'd joined a youth sports team. I smiled at the thought, proud in a distant, quiet way. I knew I would always carry a piece of him in my heart, even though I wasn't in his life anymore. The years had softened the pain, leaving behind a kind of peaceful acceptance. Jack was living his life, and I was living mine, and somehow, that felt right. The memory of him no longer hurt. Instead, it was a gentle reminder of a past that had shaped me and brought me to where I was. As my own children grew older, I shared parts of my story with them, in ways they could understand, hoping they'd learn from the experiences that had shaped me. I wanted them to know that life would sometimes test them, that there would be times when they'd be hurt or disappointed. But I also wanted them to know that they had the strength to move past it, that no matter how broken things might seem, there was always the possibility of building something beautiful again. Rachel and I found time to nourish our relationship amidst the busyness of raising kids. We took weekend getaways when we could, kept up our tradition of quiet nights at home, and made sure to celebrate anniversaries with intention, marking each year not just with dinner or gifts but with reflections on how far we'd come together. I'd tell her often how grateful I was to have her in my life, how I couldn't imagine doing any of this without her. And each time, she'd smile, squeezing my hand in silent understanding. She knew what it meant to me, the second chance we'd both given each other, and the life we'd created on the foundation of that trust. One sunny afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch watching my son teach his younger sister how to ride her bike. She was nervous, wobbling as he held on to the back of her seat, and he kept encouraging her, saying she could do it, to keep trying. I felt a swell of pride watching them, seeing their resilience and kindness toward each other. They had a bond that reminded me of the support I'd found in Rachel and the family we'd built, grounded in love and understanding. As I watched them, I thought back to everything that had brought me here, every twist and turn, every moment of heartbreak and healing. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had led me to a life that was richer, fuller than I'd ever imagined. I'd come to realize that sometimes, the most painful paths lead us to the places where we're meant to be. In that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Over time, life settled into a comfortable rhythm, one marked by the laughter of our children, quiet evenings with Rachel, and the steady unfolding of our shared dreams. Watching our kids grow into their own personalities, our son's adventurous spirit and our daughter's curious mind, felt like a reward for the journey we'd been on. They had a warmth and openness that I knew came from the love and stability we'd worked so hard to create. As our children grew, Rachel and I continued to nurture our relationship, finding small moments to stay connected despite the whirlwind of parenthood. Every Friday night, we made it a tradition to spend time just the two of us, sharing a meal, talking about our hopes and plans. Sometimes, it was the small things we did for each other, like leaving a note on the fridge or setting aside time for a quiet coffee in the morning, that kept us close. Our lives were full and busy, but we never lost sight of the commitment we'd made to one another. One fall evening, as the leaves turned vibrant shades of red and gold, I found myself sitting with Rachel after the kids had gone to bed. We were reminiscing, talking about the early days, the challenges we'd faced, and how far we'd come. There was a sense of contentment in her eyes as she looked at me, and it reminded me of how grateful I was for her presence in my life. "Did you ever think," she asked, her voice soft, "that you'd end up here, with all of this?" I smiled, taking her hand. "If you told me back then, I'd have never believed it," I admitted. "But now, I can't imagine it any other way. You and the kids, you've given me more than I ever thought I deserved." She squeezed my hand, a knowing look in her eyes. "You deserve all of it, Alex. Every bit." As we sat there in the warm glow of our home, I realized that Rachel had become my safe harbor, the place where I could be fully myself. She had not only helped me heal but had shown me what true partnership and love looked like. We had built a life from the ground up, one filled with mutual respect, trust, and the shared goal of creating a happy, healthy family. In time, I even felt comfortable enough to share the full story of my past with our children, in a way that honored the truth but also conveyed the lessons I'd learned. I wanted them to know the importance of integrity, the courage it takes to start over, and the power of forgiveness, not necessarily for others, but for oneself. They listened with a maturity beyond their years, nodding thoughtfully, and I could see they understood, at least in part, the journey that had brought our family to where it was. With each passing year, I felt my heart heal a little more. My life was no longer defined by betrayal or loss, but by resilience and the love I'd found in Rachel and our children. I'd reached a place where the pain was merely a chapter in my story, a chapter that, while difficult, had led me to a life that was fuller and more meaningful than anything I'd known before. The culmination of my journey hit home one particular evening. Our son was about to graduate high school, and as we prepared a family gathering in his honor, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just in him but in the family we had become. As I looked around our home, at the family and friends gathered, I realized that I was no longer the man haunted by the past. I was a father, a husband, and someone who had found peace through the love and support of those who had stood by me. That evening, as Rachel and I watched our son give a speech to the family, sharing his dreams and aspirations, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had come full circle, bringing me from a place of brokenness to one of fulfillment and purpose. I'd learned that sometimes life shatters us, not to break us but to show us the strength we didn't know we had. And in the end, I was grateful for every step of the journey, for the love I'd found, and for the family that had given my life new meaning. As we stood there, arm in arm, I whispered to Rachel, "Thank you for everything." She looked at me, a soft smile on her face, and simply replied, "This is only the beginning." And I believed her. We had built a foundation of trust, love, and resilience that would carry us forward, no matter what the future held. I knew then that I was exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by the family that had become my home, with a heart that was finally at peace. As the years continued to pass, life took on a richness that I never would have thought possible. Our children blossomed into young adults, each pursuing their dreams with the same determination and kindness that Rachel and I had worked so hard to instill in them. Our son went off to college, studying engineering with a passion that made us proud, while our daughter followed her love for the arts, showing a talent for music that seemed to light up any room she entered. Rachel and I settled into the rhythm of an empty nest, though our home was never truly empty. Weekends were filled with visits from the kids, family dinners, and stories about their new adventures. Rachel's support, laughter, and friendship had been constants in my life for so long, and now, with more time to ourselves, we enjoyed the quiet pleasures of being together without the demands of parenting. We took up new hobbies together, spent long weekends traveling to places we'd always wanted to see, and continued to build memories that deepened our bond. One summer evening, as Rachel and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set in a blaze of oranges and purples, she brought up an idea that caught me by surprise. "Have you ever thought about sharing your story, Alex?" she asked gently, her eyes thoughtful. "I think there's a lot that people could learn from what you went through, and from how you found peace." I was taken aback at first. Sharing my story, the story of betrayal, pain, and eventual healing, wasn't something I'd considered beyond the close circle of family and friends. It had always felt like a deeply personal journey, one I'd walked with Rachel and those closest to me. But as I looked into her eyes, I realized she was right. If my experience could help even one person facing the kind of betrayal I had, then perhaps it was worth sharing. Perhaps, in telling my story, I could bring hope to others on their own journeys toward healing. Over the next few months, with Rachel's encouragement, I began writing down the story of my life, focusing not just on the pain but on the lessons I'd learned and the strength I'd found along the way. I wrote about the importance of resilience, the power of self-discovery, and the way love, real, unwavering love, could rebuild even the most broken hearts. Writing it all out was cathartic, bringing up old memories and emotions but also reinforcing the peace I'd come to feel. It was as though putting my story into words gave me a new perspective, a deeper appreciation for the growth I'd undergone. Eventually, I published a memoir. I was nervous, unsure of how it would be received, but the responses were overwhelming. Messages poured in from people around the world who shared their own experiences, people who found comfort and strength in the words I'd put on paper. I realized that by sharing my journey, I'd found a new purpose, a way to use my story to uplift others, to remind them that even in the darkest times, there is a path forward. Through it all, Rachel stood by me, her quiet support steady and unfaltering. She was my biggest cheerleader, encouraging me to embrace this new chapter in my life with open arms. We held book signings together, traveled to small towns for readings, and even spoke at events where people would come up, share their stories, and thank me for helping them feel less alone. It was humbling and profoundly moving to know that my words had touched lives beyond anything I could have imagined. In those moments, I knew that everything I'd gone through, every hardship and heartache, had led me to a place where I could make a difference, even in small ways. And each time someone shared their gratitude, I'd look over at Rachel, and we'd share a quiet smile, both of us knowing that this life, this journey we traveled together, had become something far greater than we ever expected. We continued to build our life together, exploring new horizons, finding joy in simple moments, and always holding close the family we'd created. The past no longer haunted me, it had become a story I could tell with peace, a testament to resilience and the power of love. And as the years unfolded, I knew, without a doubt, that I'd found my way home, not just to a place, but to a life filled with purpose, joy, and a love that had weathered every storm. As the years continued to unfold, life carried Rachel and me through new chapters marked by milestones and quiet, cherished moments. Our children became adults in their own right, carving paths and creating lives that made us proud. Our son graduated from college and landed a job he was passionate about, while our daughter pursued her music career with determination, pouring her heart into her art. Watching them thrive filled us with a sense of fulfillment that only deepened with time. Rachel and I began to settle comfortably into this next phase of life. Retirement wasn't something we rushed into, but as we approached it, we started to slow down, savoring each day with a quiet kind of joy. We traveled more often, visiting places we'd always dreamed of seeing together, vineyards in California, the coastlines of Maine, the historic towns scattered across Europe. These trips were filled with laughter and wonder, reminding us of the beauty in the world and the privilege of exploring it side by side. One winter, we took a trip to a cabin tucked away in the mountains, just the two of us. It was a place that embraced solitude, with snow-covered pines surrounding us and a small fireplace crackling in the evenings. We spent our days hiking through the woods, marveling at the crisp stillness around us, and our nights sitting by the fire, sharing stories and dreams for the future. It was during one of these evenings, under a star-filled sky, that Rachel shared something that would become one of the most precious memories of my life. She took my hand and looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. "Alex," she began, her voice steady, "if I could go back in time, to before I knew you, to before everything, I'd still choose this. I'd choose you, every time. What we've built, it's my greatest joy." Her words struck me deeply. In that moment, I realized how much Rachel had become not just my partner but my anchor, the person who had helped me see beyond the pain, who had given me the strength to rebuild my life and then made it more beautiful than I'd ever imagined. The depth of our journey together, from the brokenness of my past to the wholeness of our present, filled me with an overwhelming gratitude that words couldn't quite capture. As we grew older, we turned our focus toward giving back. Inspired by the support we'd received in our own lives, Rachel and I began volunteering, mentoring young couples and families in our community. We shared what we'd learned about resilience, forgiveness, and the strength it takes to create a lasting relationship. It became our way of paying forward the kindness and wisdom others had shown us along the way. We met couples facing challenges, some similar to what I'd gone through, and we helped them find hope and strength in each other. It felt like our life had come full circle, and now, we were able to offer others the hope and encouragement that had once been given to us. Eventually, our children began their own families, and Rachel and I became grandparents. Holding my grandchildren for the first time brought back memories of holding my own children, of seeing the world through new eyes, full of wonder and hope. Watching our children become parents felt like the ultimate gift, a testament to the life we'd built and the love we'd nurtured. As we spent time with our grandchildren, sharing stories and passing down little pieces of wisdom, I found myself reflecting on the legacy we'd created. It wasn't one of fame or fortune, but of love, resilience, and the courage to embrace a life filled with meaning and purpose. Rachel and I would often sit on our porch, watching the sunset and talking about all we'd seen and done. We knew we'd been through trials, but we also knew those trials had shaped us, had led us to the life we'd built together, one founded on honesty, trust, and the enduring power of love. One quiet evening, as we watched the sunset, I looked over at Rachel, my partner, my friend, my love. The years had given us a deeper connection than I ever thought possible, and in that moment, I realized that she was, and always had been, my true home. We'd weathered storms, celebrated joys, and created a life rich in the things that mattered most. As the stars appeared above us, she took my hand, and I knew, without a doubt, that every step of our journey had been worth it. The life we had built was more than I ever could have dreamed of, and as we sat there together, I felt an overwhelming peace, a deep, abiding sense of gratitude for the love that had carried us through it all. And as I looked at Rachel, I whispered the words that had come to mean everything: thank you, for choosing this life with me. In the end, our story was one of love that had been tested, rebuilt, and strengthened through every trial. It was a love that had withstood the darkest of times, transforming brokenness into beauty, and it was a story that, even in its quiet simplicity, was nothing short of extraordinary. In the final chapters of our lives, Rachel and I settled into a serene routine, embracing the quiet moments with a deep appreciation. Our days were filled with laughter from visits with our children and grandchildren, who had become the very heart of our world. Watching our family grow, seeing pieces of ourselves in each of them, filled us with a joy that went beyond words. We had created a legacy of love and resilience, one that we knew would continue long after we were gone. One spring afternoon, our family gathered at our home for a celebration. It was our anniversary, and our children had arranged a surprise party, bringing together friends and family who had been part of our journey. The house was alive with laughter, music, and memories as everyone shared stories, recalling moments that had shaped not just us, but the people around us as well. As I looked around, I was overcome with gratitude, marveling at how life had transformed from the darkest moments into a picture of happiness I never would have imagined. During the celebration, our son stood up to give a toast. His voice was steady, but his words carried a depth of emotion that touched us all. "Mom and Dad," he began, glancing around the room, "you've taught us so much, not just about life, but about love, resilience, and what it means to be family. You've shown us that true love isn't about perfection. It's about the willingness to keep going, to grow together, and to never give up on one another. We are who we are because of the example you've set." Hearing those words filled me with a profound sense of accomplishment. Rachel and I had always hoped to instill in our children the values that had sustained us through the years, but to hear it spoken aloud was a validation of the life we'd built together. Tears filled Rachel's eyes as she took my hand, and we exchanged a look of shared understanding. This was the legacy we'd worked so hard to create, a legacy that was now etched in the lives of those we loved most. After the toast, our daughter handed us a gift. It was a photo album, filled with pictures that spanned our entire lives together, from our earliest days, through the years of raising our children, to the present. Each page told a story, a beautiful reminder of the memories we'd made and the love we'd shared. As we flipped through the pages, laughter mixed with tears as we recalled the moments captured in each photograph. The night grew late, and slowly, guests began to leave, each one embracing us and sharing heartfelt words that reminded us of the lives we'd touched. Eventually, it was just Rachel and me, sitting side by side, surrounded by the remnants of the celebration. The house was quiet again, but it was a comforting quiet, filled with the echoes of love and laughter that still lingered in the air. Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in silence, both of us taking in the beauty of the night. After a while, she broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever think about how far we've come, Alex?" she asked, her tone filled with awe. "It's like, all those struggles, all those times we thought we'd never make it, they all led us here." I nodded, my heart full as I looked down at her. "I do, Rachel. And I wouldn't trade a single moment of it, even the hardest parts. Because every step brought us here, to this life, this family. And I couldn't have done any of it without you." In that moment, I felt a peace that went beyond anything I'd ever known. We had faced life's storms together, weathered each one, and emerged with a love that was unbreakable, a life that was beautiful beyond measure. And now, as we sat together in the twilight of our years, I knew that we had lived fully, loved deeply, and created a legacy that would carry on in the lives of our children and grandchildren. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into years, Rachel and I continued to cherish each moment we had together. We spent our time surrounded by family, embracing the little joys of everyday life. Our story, once marked by heartache and challenges, had become a tapestry of love and resilience, a story that, in its own quiet way, was a testament to the power of never giving up, of always choosing love. And when the time finally came for us to say goodbye, I felt no fear, only gratitude. We had lived a life that was more than I ever dreamed possible, filled with a love that had carried us through every season. As I looked at Rachel one last time, her hand in mine, I knew that our love was something eternal, something that would live on in the hearts of those we had touched. In the end, ours was a love story not of grand gestures, but of quiet, steadfast devotion, a love that had withstood the test of time and that would echo through generations. And as I closed my eyes, I knew that I was going home, not to a place, but to the love that had been my constant, my compass, and my greatest gift. Our story would live on, not in the words of a book or the memory of a single moment, but in the lives we had touched, the family we had built, and the legacy of love we left behind. And that, I realized, was all I could have ever hoped for. As the years moved on and the twilight of our lives stretched into an endless horizon, I felt the pull toward one final adventure with Rachel, something to mark the incredible journey we had shared. We wanted to do something daring, something that would remind us both that life, no matter how many years have passed, could still be thrilling. So, with a mix of nervous anticipation and excitement, we decided on one last bold escapade, a hot air balloon ride over the Grand Canyon at dawn. We arrived early, the cool desert air refreshing as we watched the sun begin to light up the cliffs and valleys. The world below stretched vast and untouched, as if time itself had been paused just for us. We stepped into the balloon's basket, the pilot giving us a reassuring nod before we gently lifted off the ground, floating higher and higher until we were gliding silently above one of the world's most breathtaking sights. As we rose, the golden light of dawn began to spill over the canyon, casting shadows and colors that took our breath away. I looked at Rachel, her face radiant in the early morning light, her eyes wide with wonder, and I realized that even now, after all these years, she still left me in awe. Halfway into the ride, as we floated in serene silence, Rachel turned to me with a mischievous smile. "Alex," she said, her voice filled with excitement, "how about we make one last, wild memory?" Before I could ask what she had in mind, she reached into her bag and pulled out 2 parachutes. My heart skipped a beat, and a laugh escaped me as I caught her drift. "Are you serious?" I asked, a mix of thrill and apprehension in my voice. But I knew she was. She grinned, nodding. "One last leap together. Let's do it." And so, in that incredible moment, holding each other's hand and counting down, we took a leap of faith that mirrored every decision we'd made together over the years. We fell through the sky, the canyon walls a blur of reds and golds around us, the wind rushing past, the thrill of the drop exhilarating as we descended. For those few seconds, it felt like time had dissolved, and we were flying, free and fearless. As our parachutes opened and we glided toward the canyon floor, I looked over at Rachel and saw that same spark of life, that boundless spirit that had captivated me since the day I met her. Together, we landed, laughing and breathless, feeling more alive than we had in years. In the end, our final adventure wasn't just a thrilling leap, it was a reminder that love is an adventure, that life with her was an endless journey of taking risks, facing the unknown, and embracing every moment. As we made our way back to the rim of the canyon, hand in hand, I knew that this would be the memory that stayed with us forever, a perfect finale to a life filled with bold choices, boundless love, and the incredible journey we'd shared. And as we walked away, looking out one last time at the view, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together, our love forever soaring high above the cliffs, catching the light of every new dawn. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe to the channel to watch my next videos and share with me your opinion, what you would do in my place.